Mr. Tirumurti, you have seen the international reaction to terrorism. A consensus seems to have been evolving after the 9/11 attacks in the United States, but now that consensus seems to be dissipating. In fact, after Pahalgam, international reaction has been very muted. How would you assess the international reaction now?
Actually, you have hit the nail on the head. I think the international reaction has been a bit of a mixed bag. While they have condemned terror, but at the same time, all of them have called out for restraint and de-escalation and regional stability. And all this they said before the strikes which India had made on terrorist camps. And in the 14 days or so, which there was a gap before we took these strikes, they did hardly anything to hold Pakistan accountable. And they did not even call on Pakistan to take steps, and which was very unfortunate. And basically all they requested is that, as I mentioned, that they were requesting India, which is the victim, not to go after the perpetrators, which is Pakistan. But it is also important to understand the fault lines, why this is so. And you will recall that the External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar's first tweet after the strikes was zero tolerance to terror. Now, I just have a small story. When I was chairing the Security Council Committee on Counter-Terrorism, at that time I was the chair, and we were drafting a chair statement, which means all the 15 countries had to agree. And just as it is India's position, I put forward that we should include the words zero tolerance to terrorism in the text. And I'm sure that all of you will agree that it is a very important and fairly straightforward thing. But you will be surprised. Some of the Western countries objected to inclusion of the word zero tolerance to terrorism. And I asked them why. They said that if you say zero tolerance, it means that when you're going after the terrorists, you will go about in such a way that you will violate their human rights. So now you have terrorists killing people, violating these people's human rights. And if we are being told that when you go after the terrorists, you will violate their human rights, so we cannot agree. So I'm just telling you what sort of a divide we have in the international community, especially after we had the consensus. And we have the EU Commissioner for Foreign Policy and National Security who can't even get around to using the word terror, condemning a terror act in India. And here they have come with a huge group with India to further their strategic partnership. So good luck to them. Now, so the global fight, which we have to recognize, is no more a cohesive fight. We were in an era of your terrorist and my terrorist before 9/11. After 9/11, it changed all that. We had a consensus to fight it together. Now we are going back to the era of your terrorist and my terrorist. And if you look at Europe, they are going after their terrorists, which is really the right-wing terrorists. If you are looking at United States, the Biden administration went after what they call it as racially and ethnically motivated terrorists or violent extremists. You had Canada mentioning that your terrorists are not my terrorists. And you had China, which actually blocked the proposals which India made for a listing of terrorists. And you even had the OIC, the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. They wanted to use Islamophobia as an excuse to condemn terror. So basically, condone terror. So basically, you had these reactions, and ultimately, we have to handle terror ourselves. And that is what is coming around to. The other last point I wanted to make is that the terrorists, as I mentioned, they have singled out Hindus and they shot them. Now, I just wanted to draw a small parallel. When in the American universities, when you had protests, for and against what is happening in Gaza and the Gaza war, they are almost always, they are called as anti-Semitic or they are called as Islamophobic. So even a college protest and university protest, you're calling them in religious terms. But here are terrorists who are singling Indians out on the basis of a religion, and we don't have the courage to call them out as Hindu-phobic. I think that is very, very important for us to understand that religiophobia is as much part of terrorism as anything else. So these are just the 2 points I wanted to make. Thank you.
And a few lines to what you
sure.
had to say. No, if I might add to what Tirumurti said a few minutes ago, one lesson I think we need to learn. I say this with by virtue of the experience that I've had over the years. The rest of the world will not fight our wars. The rest of the world will not support us. I was there in after the 1962 war with China. I was a young officer and I was part of a delegation that went to the United States because we were promised arms, because we didn't have enough arms to deal with China. We went with high hopes and we came back empty-handed. In 1965, once again, we hoped that the United States or the West would come to our help with regard to again, arms and ammunition. They came with a lot of advice. They told us how we should alter our security arrangements within the country, but they produced nothing. 1971, and that was dramatic. Mrs. Indira Gandhi went to Russia and signed the Indo-Soviet Treaty, which gave us the strength. We didn't want any muscle from the Russians, but we were willing to take on not merely Pakistan, the host of the West, West Asia, and much of the support which those who believe in Abrahamic religion seem to have in the West. And when we were fighting the war the creation of Bangladesh, what did Mr. Henry Kissinger, one-time foe who later became a friend of mine, did was to send the 7th Fleet steaming up the Bay of Bengal. I think there are not many people here who were alive at that time. It had an electrifying effect on and impact on the nation that the United States were going to enter the war on the side of Pakistan and sort of make India fight a two-front war. We had a steely Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, somewhat like our present Prime Minister, who, when the message came in, I was the carrier of the message to the cabinet room, and she had only this to say: "Carry on, gentlemen, we will fight the war and we shall win." And that she did. So that is a lesson that we need to learn.